Hey, everybody, it's Ryan. Thanks for downloading today's show. And just a reminder, as always, Wake Up War Chant is brought to you by our friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central and Township in the heart of College Town. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, from Tallahassee to Thomasville and from coast to Atlantic coast, it's time to Wake Up War Chant here on 97.9 ESPN Radio, and it's a very happy Monday, December the 4th to you and yours. You're currently listening to the voice of Ryan Kelly. I'm the director of digital media at warchant.com. Drew Hickens on the other side of the glass, pushing the buttons, making things work. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm just fine. We have a great show for you today. Of course, we're going to break down everything that happened this weekend, some of the coaching search ahead. Florida State's going to a 36th straight bowl. Sorry, Virginia Tech. That still just so happens to be the record. Even the NCAA put that out. You're not going to hear from Jimbo Fisher today. I know you're shocked, but Jimbo Fisher did not have time to talk to our own Gene Williams today. He's too busy looking like he wants to sway with random fans at basketball games. But thanks so much for waking up with us here 6 a.m. on 97.9 ESPN Radio, streaming, TuneIn Radio app, WTSM app, all those good places. Podcast, iTunes, Podcast Republic, warchantradio.com, YouTube, yada, yada, yada. We thank you when you rate and subscribe. It helps the show out tremendously when you leave us a good review. And, of course, radio at warchant.com, at Wake Up Warchant. That's your Twitter feed and your email address. And our friends at For the Table make this all work. Madison Social, Central, Township, all there in the heart of College Town. This is as crazy, as busy, as eventful, and as strange a 72 hours of Seminole football as I think I've ever experienced. And that includes the Bowden stuff, Drew. This is as surreal and odd. Because here's the thing. When Bobby Bowden leaves Florida State and his team carries him off the field, and of course, he eventually asks to be put down, and he does his press conference. You know what Bobby Bowden did the Sunday after that? Bobby Bowden stayed at home, maybe woke up, went to church, read the paper, maybe watched a little NFL football, a couple former players. But this time around, on Sunday morning, there's a band greeting Jimbo Fisher as he walks off the red carpet of a plane to College Station, Texas. And everything about this is surreal. Like I wish there was a better way to put this into words for you. I know that's my job, but it's just surreal. There's really no better word to put it. Everything about this 72 hours, from the game you play Saturday, from a bowl selection to Shreveport, Louisiana, to Texas A&M introducing Jimbo Fisher like he's a foreign dictator, it's crazy.
I mean, look, even when last week when all the reports were surfacing that we were sure he was gone and this and that, it just didn't feel like, until it actually happened, it didn't feel like it was going to. It's like once it happened, like you said, it's just so surreal. It's shocking because when you picture Florida State, you picture Bobby Bowden and you picture Jimbo Fisher, and you thought Jimbo Fisher was going to be here for a long, long time. I don't even know what this feeling is like. Like, it's so strange to me. And I will say this, as long as Florida State makes the right hire, I'm excited about the future. I'm excited about where this can go. Obviously, it needs to be done quickly, which we'll talk about in a little bit, the effect it's had on recruiting and whatnot. But again, I think that things had gotten to this point where earlier in the week you were hoping he was staying, and by Wednesday you knew that he had burnt too many bridges and things had got too toxic. You almost just wanted him to go. It just had to be done by that point.
Friday, when it actually happened, because of course when we went off the air we didn't know exactly what was going on, there was still some folks who thought that he might end up coaching that game Saturday, but Florida State ends up making the right move. He ends up not coaching that game. Odell Haggins ends up coaching that game. You have a great feel-good story on Saturday where, honestly, the 60 minutes of gameplay was the furthest thing from the story outside of keeping the streak alive. But between let's just go back. Let's start with the Christmas tree. Or actually, no, let's start with the plane flight. Because, of course, when we record our part with Gene, it's usually on Thursday nights for that Friday show, and we do Lucky 7 and we do Over Under, just because our schedules don't always mesh together. And around this time, it breaks, so there's a plane coming in at 5 in the morning into Tallahassee. Oh, whatever. There's a Gulfstream coming in at noon. Oh, That might be a little interesting. So you have that. And a couple hours later, surfaces a freaking picture of Jimbo Fisher's Christmas tree on the side of the road for the trash bin to pick up. Someone goes by and gets it, by the way. How about that? So you put all of that stuff together, and then it comes out not too long later that he's a done deal, Texas A&M. It's resigned. I don't know if I've ever seen a coaching departure quite as strange as one that goes to an artificial Christmas tree getting put out on the road and plane tracks that end up being nothing.
Yeah, I got to say, I think after a lot of people saw the contract, you understand. You see 10 years, $75 million guaranteed. $75 million, people. You want to talk about loyalty? I don't know what loyalty is for $75 million guaranteed dollars in my pocket. I'm sorry.
I could forget the definition of the word for 75
and
guaranteed.
if you say anything different, you're lying to yourself. So a lot of people would have understood this had he had just gone about it differently, had a press conference, done things the right way, done things like you don't handle this situation better than Scott Frost has handled that situation at UCF. Exactly. A guy who accepted that job, he said right before the Temple game. He said he's willing to coach the Peach Bowl. He's emotional. There was reports he had cold feet about, by the way, taking a job that was a far better job, an upgrade from UCF, not a downgrade. It's a sublateral move to A&M. I don't care what anyone says. A&M is not. I'm not even sure it's a top 15 job. The facilities are unbelievable. You have a lot of money. Awesome. You haven't won anything since 1939. You had Johnny Manziel and you had nothing to show for it. A generational talent at quarterback.
Sometimes to his benefit, sometimes to his weakness. I think we all know that Jimbo Fisher is a proud man.
Right, and I think, go ahead, sorry.
The idea that he thought that he could control everything, to the idea that this news wasn't going to get out, and his players didn't know, and the media didn't know, and the coaches didn't, at a certain point, it passes being prideful and feeling like you can control everything. At a certain point, it goes to thinking people are idiots because
he forgot what era we're living in. It's like he doesn't understand how social media works. And
he really not on social media.
Yeah, he really doesn't, I guess. But again, it rubs off. It comes off like you just don't care. You just don't care to all those. And, I don't think he really – obviously, he's probably a little affected by how his legacy will end here in Tallahassee. I'm sure that hurts him a little bit. But more than anything, I think what will hurt him is how his players feel about him. And I think the way that he exited and for the players to find out through Twitter, it's just wrong, man. It's not fair, especially to those freshmen, who he got to come from Texas and promised him the world and this and that. It's just not right. He butchered this situation from start to finish. And like I said, I understand why he went to Texas A&M. I really do. $75 million. I get it, man. But you don't have to be so fake about everything. You just don't. He just went out there and he refused to be real or candid about anything he ever was. And I don't know why I'm shocked, because that's who he is, and he's always been like that. But I think a lot of people are now just starting to see it, and that's why so many people were hurt by it.
Yeah, and the thing is, I'm not here to tell you Jimbo Fisher's some awful person. I mean, Jimbo Fisher's done a lot of good things for Tallahassee, even beyond, of course, winning football games. He's been more than charitable with his time with kids and, of course, visiting people in the hospital. I'm not here to paint this guy as a bully or anything like that. I mean, there were certainly some problems in his personality, and there were certainly some situations where the way that he goes about things rubbed Florida State the wrong way, and it rightfully should have. And I think this relationship kind of reached its logical conclusion, I think, more than anything. But I will say this before we move on and we talk about the recruits and we talk about Willie Taggart and some of the head coaching candidates that are right now kind of swarming around Florida State. I would caution a Florida State fan to say this, and I understand the wounds are still fresh for everybody. There are a lot of people who are still trying to process losing only their second coach in 41 years at Florida State, which is remarkable to say the least. Do not let what Jimbo Fisher did affect the way you look at the Jimbo Fisher era at Florida State.
I mean, I got to watch a national title in person in 2013, and whether you want to thank Jimbo Fisher or Jameis Winston for that or both, I don't really care. I'm thankful for what he did, but I can still be thankful and proud of his time here and also be upset and hurt and mad by the way he decided to exit a place who gave him everything. No matter what reports said, a place who was willing to give him everything.
And that's the thing. If you're a Florida State fan and you're mad at Jimbo Fisher this morning, and you're mad at the way he handled things, and you're mad at some of the things that came out about how he didn't feel like the facilities were enough and he didn't feel like the donations were. Sure, of course, you have every right to be mad, but don't let that taint the memory of Pasadena or that night in Clemson or the 29 straight games or what you were able to do against Florida and Miami in this period and the ACC titles. Don't let that taint that, because I think, first of all, that's not fair to where the program is, and that's not fair to what the program's accomplished, not just Jimbo Fisher, but the program, and it's not fair to all the great players who will go down as some of the most beloved Seminoles of all time.
You've seen a lot of people talk about how the program is bigger than one person, and I do fully. Now, look, I do acknowledge the fact that Jimbo Fisher has taken this job back up to an elite level and this program back up to an elite level. We have him to thank for kind of pulling us out of the muck there near the end of the Bobby Bowden era. But make no mistake about it, Florida State is a top 5 program. This is a great job. There's plenty of people who want it, and it is bigger than one person. And Florida State will be okay. And I think really the main thing that rubbed me and a lot of other people the wrong way is not only how he handled it, but the talk all season of loyalty. And look, I understand that this is a business, but you can't have it both ways, man. You can't come out and say this is a business and this and that, and look, I had to do what's best, and then come out here and call fans out for loyalty and to keep cheering and how he personally is going to fix it. You just can't do that. It's one way or the other, and it's a business, and I totally understand the move that he made for himself and his family, because at the end of the day, he might have already been set for life. I'm sure he was, but $75 million, I mean, the man will never have to worry about anything financial again a day in his life, no matter what. You can't turn down 75 guaranteed. I think that Texas A&M could go to any coach in the country, bar outside of Saban maybe, and say, I'll give you $80 million guaranteed, and they would all seriously consider it. It doesn't matter who they were. That's so much money. And it's like I said, I can't stress enough how the guaranteed, it's insane. It's insane that they did that, because it could not work out. What if Jimbo Fisher goes 8-4 for his first 4 seasons? That's not $75 million worth of that's not what you paid for. You're paying for national titles. You're saying we are putting our money where what we want, and they better get results. And if they don't, what's going to happen if you got to cut ties with them in 4 or 5 years and you have to pay the rest of that? Because Florida State, that was one of the worst contracts in sports, and now A&M went and outdid them by 100 times.
You have wrote a check now that I don't think anyone, as long as Nick Saban is in that division, is going to be able to balance, because you're asking for so many things, and you're asking for so much success for a job that, let's face it, if you're talking about historically how they do, I'm not talking about how much money or how much facilities. As we've learned over the last week, apparently Aggie fans on Twitter are very, very quick to point out, we're pretty, we promise. We're prettier than Texas, we promise. It's, God, that whole little brother thing.
It's like the Napoleon complex times 100.
God.
It's like they act like we have some third world facilities over here at Florida State. We're just, you guys are just trash.
Were you aware that Tallahassee is the capital of Zimbabwe, Drew? Because if you go on Twitter, Aggie fans pretty much think as much. But let me just set the record straight on this. In terms of historically what's been done and accomplished at Texas A&M, it's probably the 4th best job in that division.
There's no probably.
Behind Alabama, behind Auburn, behind LSU.
Yeah, I mean, and you could argue others are ahead of them. I'll give them the 4th best job for the money and the facilities, but as far as accomplishments go, they're not even the 4th best job as far as accomplishments go. They haven't won anything by anything I mean, they have not won a national title since 1939. They didn't even accomplish things when they were in the horrid Big 12. It's like, I don't see it, man. I don't understand it unless it's just the money talks. And in the money talks, money always talks. I get that. But other than that, the 2 jobs are just not comparable to me.
All right, and speaking of the 2 jobs, only one of them's open at the moment, and that's the Florida State Seminoles. Of course, all indications seem to be that it's Willie Taggart. But here's the thing. Regardless of who it is, Florida State's got to work fast, because what is it now? It's 3 recruits yesterday that decommitted after the 4 earlier. I want to say it's 3, right?
Yeah, it's 7 in total, 8 since November.
Yeah, that's a lot. And Florida State's going to need to move fast and find a guy. And here's the thing. I think if it really is Willie Taggart, if he's the dude, which, again, all indications, you can look for yourself, job board, warchant.com. Warchant 30 gives you a free day trial, 30-day free trial to get back there and get that exclusive access to the tribal council and to Gene's coaching nuggets there on that hot board. But all indications seem to be that Taggart's still the number one guy. Who's who they want. And you better hope it's a guy like a Willie Taggart, because if it isn't, I'm not saying Florida State's done, because Florida State's recruited well enough to take some shots in recruiting in one class and be okay and roll right on. But if you don't get a guy, a dynamic guy who kids respond to quickly like a Willie Taggart, this thing could stay south, not just be south currently in December.
I mean, I talked about it before the Jimbo Fisher rumors even started. When the season was going the way that it was going, I wasn't trying to blow things out of proportion, but all I said is this is how it starts. I'm not saying that Jimbo couldn't fix it, is what I was saying at the time, but this is how the decline starts. And now that he's gone, you're in full, like, you have to make the right hire. That's the only thing that matters right now. Because if you don't, all of a sudden you turn into Florida of the last decade. You turn into Miami of the last decade. It's not that hard to make the wrong hire here and slip into a decade full of mediocrity. It's just it's easy to happen. That's why it's so important for Florida State to keep this momentum going and not turn into something that's a turnover job where, 3-4 coaches in the next 12 years when they had this model of consistency for 40-something years. And let me just go on record. I don't think that's what's going to happen here, because it's just not that hard to win at Florida State. There's so many resources and so many things that are in your favor.
And Florida said the same thing in 2010.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong, but Florida, there's a lot of other factors there. But again, you're right. Florida's an elite program. Whether we like it or not, sooner or later, Florida will be back. But Florida State, man, we just had the quote-unquote lost decade not too long ago. I don't think anybody wants to see that happen again.
Well, I think the thing that scares you and it worries you, if you're a Florida State fan, is you were the benefactor of what happened in 2010 when Randy Shannon gets fired in Miami towards the end of his era that, of course, didn't go so well. Urban Meyer leaves in 2010. That's all after Jimbo Fisher's first year. And out of nowhere, those two programs are in turmoil. It's been a long week. Miami gets hit with sanctions. Will Muschamp doesn't seem to work out. Florida can't find a quarterback. You end up on top. And I think you're a little bit worried, even though Miami doesn't completely have the resources that a Florida or Florida State has. And even though they got embarrassed over the weekend, they're still, at least record-wise and perception-wise, and a lot of that can matter with recruits at times, in a better place than Florida State and Florida right now, who are, one just got a coach, one still looking for a coach, and that's why that hire is so important, and that's why I think a lot of people are sweating this, especially when this is a fan base that in 4 decades hasn't had to go through a coaching search, and now they're looking for a guy, and they know what happened the last time, that 2 jobs in this state were up for grabs. It benefited the team with stability. Granted, it was only a season ahead of stability, but now Mark Richt, just finishing up year 2 at Miami, you're just a little worried and you don't want to get behind the 8 ball. I completely understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, these are how things snowball. So it's very important for Florida State to make the right hire here. And if they do, everything will be fine. And we won't be having this conversation next year. Now, whoever Florida State does hire, whether it be Willie Taggart or whoever, you really can't expect them to come right in here and win 11 games next year. So that's kind of the issue where you say the team with stability, typically speaking, is the one that benefits from it. Because look, Miami just won 10 games this year. Maybe 11 if they win their bowl game, which I don't think they'll beat Wisconsin, but maybe 11. And they've already done that. They've established that now. Whatever you want to say about how their season was, they won 11 games this year, 10 games. So, you can't expect that from a guy coming in for his first job. Now, a lot of people will, unfairly so, but it's just not realistic. So, again, that's why it's so important to get the right guy so you can get things rolling in the right direction quick.
Tell you what, we're going to step aside, take a break. Ira Schoffel coming up a little bit later, but let's continue this conversation right on the other end. Wake Up War Chant, 97.9 ESPN Radio. good Monday pick-me-up music, especially considering this weekend. But hey, if you have some thoughts, or if you want to know what the boss man's thoughts, our own Gene Williams, are on a lot of the stuff this weekend, a lot of stuff we just talked about, how Jimbo Fisher is going to be remembered at Florida State, just how important this hire is for Florida State, and some other stuff, some final stats on the year, some freshmen that stood out to our own Gene Williams. His 5 takes column's up. It's a premium item there to be a member of warchant.com. But again, warchant30, there's that free code. Gets you that. It gets you the recruiting hot board for 30 free days. Right now is about as good a time to be as plugged in as ever. So that's why I keep trotting that out there, because if you want it, it's there. So continuing our conversation just a little bit in terms of Florida State moving quickly, I'm interested. This is where I'm curious as to where Florida State goes, because Florida State is much more. When 2010 happened, and after that season, of course, Urban Meyer fakes a heart attack, and Randy Shannon is dismissed, and all those sanctions come down. Florida State is definitely more the Florida in this equation, because Miami just did not have the talent that Florida did at the time when Randy Shannon was dismissed. They did nothing with that highly touted 2007 class. Florida had all the talent in the world when Urban Meyer left. The cupboard was completely stocked full. But the problem is the culture of Florida, the idea of what Florida had become, and also the idea that they couldn't find a quarterback, was so broken to where I don't think anybody really could have done a great job of fixing it unless you gave them a ton of time. They knew exactly what they were doing. Florida State is loaded full of talent. We don't exactly know who the quarterback's going to be at this moment. I think whoever that next head coach is, they've got to be somebody who can fix this culture and let these kids know that they are here to win. They're still here to do what they came to do, and that's win at the highest level.
And that's why, for that reason and that reason alone, I'm all aboard the Willie train, baby.
You're going to let Coach T drive the bus?
I want Coach T to drive this bus.
And here's the thing. I mean, let's operate. Let's operate under this assumption. Let's say Willie Taggart is the head coach tomorrow, because I don't know if that's a done deal. I don't know any of that. I'm not trying to give you any insider info or anything like that, because I just don't know. But here's the thing I think we all pretty painfully obviously know. He's the front runner. He's the guy most fans want. He's the guy most boosters want. He's the guy that it seems like most of the folks in that office want. I'm curious to see, and I think I might have even said this last week, everything's just kind of run together as of late. Western Kentucky was a rebuild. And by every stretch of the word, that program stunk when he got there. Skip Holtz destroyed South Florida. Destroyed every good thing Jim Leavitt made about that program. They were terrible. Willie had to rebuild that. Willie's only been at Oregon a year, but he's had to rebuild an Oregon program that fell on some pretty hard times under Mark Helfrich. I'm interested to see if Willie Taggart is the guy. What does he do with a quote-unquote turnkey program where even though the record wasn't there last year, the talent's most certainly still in place?
You brought it up, though. I think the fact that the record is what it is and how people have talked about how there was a toxic environment in Tallahassee, even if that was stemming from Jimbo Fisher, there's some things there that need to be fixed. And I think Willie Taggart is a guy who can come in, patch that up quickly, and get these tires rolling in the right direction on the Willie bus, on the Taggart train, real quick.
Well, anyway, we'll find out. We'll ask Ira Schoffel his thoughts about that, his thoughts about Odell Haggins, thoughts about Jimbo Fisher on the other end. It's Wake Up War Chant 97.9 ESPN Radio.
Darn pop-ups and video ads.
Are you wasting your time again on clickbait FSU updates that are bloated down with ads?
Yeah. And after crashing my computer, the information isn't even up to date. You're on warchant.com. What's really going on with the Seminoles?
For the real scoop, you'll need to get your own War Chant subscription.
What's it cost?
Free. There's a 30-day trial offer right now.
You know I like free. Sign me up.
Use the promo code WARCHANT30. That's WARCHANT30. Nobody has more accurate and timely information on the Noles than WarChant.com.
WarChant.com, your ultimate Seminole source.
Monday morning, Wake Up Ford Chant 97.9 ESPN Radio, brought to you by your friends at For the Table. And in case you haven't noticed, there is no Jimbo Fisher interview today. I'm sure you're all shocked and astonished at such news. But there is an Ira Schoffel interview today, and we welcome in the managing editor of WarChant.com, Mr. Ira Schoffel. Ira, how are you?
I'm good, Ryan. If you had told me when I was in college that I would I'd be on a talk show 25 years from now, and
Informer would play?
Informer would be playing them, I probably wouldn't have believed it. So the world never ceases.
Listen, Informer is great bumper music. I will most certainly say that. Snow only had one song, but he knew what he was doing. He knew that'd be in perpetuity forever. So Sports Talk Radio is going to play the mess out of this thing. I'm going to get my checks. That's how this is going to roll. And speaking of getting checks, Ira,
Nice.
$75 million, 10 years, guaranteed. Listen, Jimbo Fisher could be one of the 5 best coaches in college football. And I would still be saying right here, right now, what in God's name is Texas A&M thinking?
Yeah, I'm curious when everything comes out on that whole story. I'm sure at some point there'll be a breakdown of kind of how those negotiations went. I have a hard time. I don't believe that they went into it planning to offer him 10 years and $75 million. My guess is it was probably something like the original reports we had heard, which was maybe 5 years for $7.5 million a year, and which is the same amount per year, but obviously half the value of the total contract. And I just kind of wonder if once they got into this week, after they had fired last week, after they had fired Kevin Sumlin, if Jimbo and his agent Jimmy Sexton, basically, my assumption is they were like, no, we want more, because at that point Texas A&M they were all in on Jimbo Fisher, so I think that they had to make him an offer he couldn't refuse, and we all know how the week played out, and it may not have been possible at some point for him to stay in Tallahassee after all of the negative feelings, but at the end of the day, I think that Texas A&M felt like they had to make him an offer that he couldn't refuse because they didn't want to be the next Tennessee.
Yeah, and heck, you could do a whole hour on that situation. I'm sure plenty of Knoxville radio station has. But, Gene, I don't want to just kind of talk about that. I do want to talk about the actual intricacies of Florida State. Where does Florida State go from here? Where does Jimbo Fisher go from here? And I thought your column hit it right on the head, and I'm not just saying that because I do think this is a parting of the ways that benefits both schools. It benefits Jimbo Fisher. It does benefit Texas A&M just in the idea that they needed to make a splash hire. They needed to show they were committed. They may be overpaid. They maybe put way too much of a contract, but they got the guy they wanted, and Florida State gets to move on from a relationship that I think all signs were showing was getting toxic and was heading a little south and maybe needed a shot in the arm. So Florida State gets what they want accomplished. Jimbo Fisher gets what he wants to accomplish, and that he walks into a place that if Jimbo Fisher's complaining about facilities 2 years later in College Station, I would pay his buyout and tell him to have a nice day right on the spot, because there's if you want to talk about nice facilities, Texas A&M's got them, and that's not to say Florida State's aren't. But, I mean, we're talking about the best of 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 the best, because the money that they can throw around, I mean, take a look at Fisher's contract. It's unreal the amount of money they've been willing to throw into a program that hasn't really accomplished much since World War II. So all that being said, this is something that's mutually beneficial, and that it gets to save the culture at Florida State, and it gets Jimbo Fisher everything it seems like he wanted.
Yeah, I think some people, when they hear you say it's best for all parties, and that's what I wrote, that, they kind of are taken aback by that because they feel like, well, FSU had Jimbo Fisher and he won a national title, turned around the program. How could you say it's best for FSU that he leaves? I just think it had gotten to that point over the last, really the last couple of years, but certainly the last year, to where it just seemed like there were irreconcilable differences. It just seemed like Jimbo was, more and more focusing on the problems and the negatives and the shortcomings at FSU. And there are some, just like there are at anywhere. And I just don't think that they were going to be able to, just do enough to make him happy in quick enough fashion. And so if he's not in a good frame of mind, that's going to affect everything he does. So on the flip side of it, I think he'll go to Texas A&M. I think he'll do really well there. I think he'll certainly early on. That's the thing about any relationship, whether it be work or family or relationships with boyfriends, girlfriends, whatever. You always have that honeymoon period where you only see the good things and you can easily accept the bad things. But as time goes on, it becomes tougher. So I think he'll do well at Texas A&M, and I think FSU's going to do really well in this job search. If it's Willie Taggart from Oregon or whatever they do, I think they're going to do really well. And I think it's possible that both programs can feel really good about where they're at, a year from now, and Jimbo Fisher can as well.
I think you hit a really good point there as well when you said it seemed like it had gotten to the point where Jimbo Fisher was focused on the negatives of what is, by all accounts, one of the best jobs in the country. And, sometimes you can do that when you've been in a relationship for a long time. You start to focus on, well, why isn't this perfect? Why isn't that perfect? That's how these things can go. And I think you could sense it, especially now that you can speak about something with hindsight completely intact, Ira. When you walked around that athletic center for the last 2-3 years, when you were inside that building, inside that press conferences, there for player availability, especially compared to what came before it, I don't want to say there was a staleness. I don't want to say there was like a stench or an aura of something funky going on, but it just something always didn't feel right around Florida State, especially compared to where it had been.
Yeah, I think there's probably a few different reasons for it. I think that, and conversely, that on Saturday after Jimbo had left and Odell Haggins took over as the interim head coach, just felt like talking to people, talking to employees, talking to people around the program. Now, obviously there's some football staff members who aren't happy about the change, but overall throughout the athletics department, there did seem to be kind of an easiness, things more relaxed. People kind of let their guard down a little bit. And I think, part of that is because of like what you said. I think Jimbo had gotten to the point where he was frustrated about a lot of things. He was always kind of pushing for this or pushing for that. And maybe sometimes kind of putting down what FSU had in certain circumstances. And look, the vibe, I guess, of the atmosphere is set by the people up on high, the leaders, the people who run the business or the operation. And, if he's not happy, then that's going to translate down to the people below him. I did think that was the case. And I think that, right now, again, there's kind of it's almost like there's been a release and people are kind of relaxed right now. Now we'll see who they hire and what the relationships are there with that new head coach and whatever staff members he brings in. But I think a fresh start or a restart isn't a bad thing right now.
And I think, you mentioned it, a spirit of ease. I think there was also a spirit of happiness on Saturday, and Gene and I mentioned it. If Jimbo Fisher ended up coaching that game on Saturday, Florida State has a PR nightmare on their hands of, regardless of what Jimbo Fisher was planning on doing after the game, there's a lot of fans probably just there to boo their head coach. There's a lot of nastiness and animosity, and instead, Saturday ends up being a day rewarding Odell Haggins for his loyalty to the program, and so many media members, so many folks, especially some of the media members on our beat who cover recruiting, of course, the staff, the coaches, the players all around FSU respect that guy so much. Ira, you've known Odell for far longer than I have. What did you kind of feel and kind of sense out of that day on Saturday?
Well, I expected it to be great. I really did. I thought when the decision to make Odell the interim head coach, I thought was perfect. I think, John Thrasher has a great feel for that kind of thing. And I thought he nailed it with that appointment. And so I thought it was going to be really good. I thought Odell would be a guy that the fans could rally around. They believe in, they trust, they know him back as a player and then as an assistant coach and just somebody who's been part of the Florida State fabric for 25 years. But it was better than I even expected. It was really one of the special days. I think when you think of kind of special days of covering Florida State football, besides the championships, the national championships, I think of, Coach Bowden's last game, Mickey Andrews, the game where his last home game against Maryland, which just the way the players responded to him, and there's certain days like that that are kind of benchmarks, and you'll always remember. And I thought this game was just like that. I mean, it was kind of quaint that it wasn't a packed house. That it was kind of, it felt like everybody who was there wanted to be there and was there to celebrate the program and celebrate Odell Haggins and to just be together. And then Odell in the post-game press conference, I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, he commanded the room. He spoke eloquently. He had great talking points. I mean, for a guy that doesn't really like to talk a lot and it doesn't do a lot of media and really just has always been kind of not media shy, but just not interested in it. I thought he was unbelievable in the postgame. So, yeah, man, I thought it was going to be a really good day, and it was way better than I expected.
Ira, I'll sound a tad bit like a homer here, so forgive me, but throughout the week when there's so much perpetuated nationally, especially some of the stuff that's just people talking out of their rear end that, Florida State's facilities are antiquated and they're behind, and maybe this isn't the job that everybody thinks it is, and Florida State had spent a lot of time this week hearing what wasn't great about Florida State, and with a lot of it not really being true. And I think for Florida State to have a day like that, to have one of their own rewarded, to have someone who would, I guess really to have a day where they're reminded what's right about Florida State, I think you couldn't have wrote a better script if you put Hollywood's best writers on it.
Yeah, I mean, it was 100%. I mean, it was everything that, again, if you were John Thrasher or Stan Wilcox, the athletic director, and you dreamed of what that day would be, I mean, it was it. I mean, the team, I thought, played well. A lot of people mentioned that they felt like the team seemed to be having fun. They didn't seem to be playing with a lot of pressure on themselves. That's not to say they played perfectly. I mean, there were some turnovers. There were some mistakes here and there. But in general, it just seemed like they were, having a good time. And, one thing I didn't even notice at the time, but I know Corey wrote about it in the paper, that Odell had the team kind of go up to the hash marks for Osceola and Renegade, which is a really nice touch, kind of a throwback to the old era. And again, I mean, look, Jimbo did a lot of great things, but I think, there's a concern when you have a coach that's had that much success and leaves that people are going to wonder, okay, what's wrong with us or what's wrong with this program? And I thought that whole day, everything about it kind of sent the message that maybe there's nothing wrong with this program. Maybe everything's going to be okay. And, this thing's a lot stronger than, any one coach, which I think was a message you heard a lot from people around the program in the last couple of days.
Ira, let's talk about the future now and the idea that Florida State's got to move fast. At the time we're recording this on Sunday night, 7 total commitments have decommitted from FSU, and this is a recruiting class. And let's face it, if Florida State had a so-so recruiting class, they've recruited well enough over the last extended period of time to where it's going to soften the blow a little bit if you have a class that's not quite in line with the rest of them. But let's face it, with this new early signing period, there's some uncharted waters. And Florida State has to work fast to find that next guy, and I think all indications are that they will. But recruiting and, of course, finding the right fit of the utmost importance for Florida State.
Yeah, I mean, this is always the challenge with, a coaching search, and they usually end up happening around this time of year, which makes it tough. But you have you're balancing getting somebody in as quick as possible to salvage recruiting versus taking your time and making sure you get the right guy. To your point, I agree. It's not like FSU's desperate for recruits. I think that, they've got so many guys coming back next year. Defensively, they're going to lose a lot of guys, but they had a lot of young guys that started playing more and more as the season went on. So I think they're going to be okay there. For the next couple of years, I think this team's going to be fine. Where you'd get hurt, if you just have a wasted class, where you really get hurt is, 3, 4 years down the road. And you just like to think that you kind of make up for it. But then, like you said, with this early signing period, that's going to be the interesting thing, because I guess December 20th to 22nd, I think, are the dates. If guys, players can sign during those few days. And, FSU right now, their commitments are down to, they're down to 11 commitments because of these 7 decommitments. Their team signing class rank is down to number 40 in the country. I mean, I can't remember ever hearing at any point in the process of Florida State football having a number 40 recruiting class in the country. So they've got a lot of work to do once they get their head coach in place. What they can do, though, because of those 2 signing periods, is I think what they'll do, excuse me, is, just tell some of these kids that, look, give us a chance. Just don't sign in the early period. Take till February, as you normally would. Give us some time to recruit you. Give us some time for you to get to know this staff. And there will be some players, some high-profile players, I'm sure, who will be like, you know what, if I had to sign today, I would go with this school, but maybe I'll give Florida State a chance. I'll give a couple other schools a chance and wait. And that's going to be what they're going to have to do. I think it's going to be tough to come in and expect to turn around the whole class in just a week or two. But if they can get some guys to hold off on their decisions, I think that'll be the key.
And I think whoever the guy is, especially if it is Willie Taggart, who currently has a lot of ties to the state of Florida, has a lot of commits from the state of Florida, has 2 coordinators with huge experience in the state of Florida, assuming they would come with him. This is a place where if that staff came in, if he really is the guy and that really is the staff, I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that they'd hit the ground running and they would. I'm not going to tell you have the number 1 class in the country or even the top 5, but certainly have a good hack at salvaging this thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's because first of all, even though he's out at Oregon right now, it was only a year ago that he was at USF. So a lot of these kids he recruited for, when they were sophomores and juniors in high school. He's got those connections. Plus, he recruited some of them to Oregon. Like you said, he's got some commitments out there right now from the state of Florida. So those are all positives. The other thing is, and I just remember back to when Eddie Gran came with Jimbo Fisher for that staff, and when he came in I guess 2010, and Eddie Gran was a great recruiter, had been at Auburn and other schools in Tennessee, and recruited really well in South Florida. And he came in and said, look, I've always done a good job in Florida, but now that I could put on an FSU hat and go recruit, it's going to be something else. And it was. I mean, they went and got LaMarcus Joyner and all those guys. Willie Taggart with an FSU hat would do some things.
Ira, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it. I'm sure we'll be talking some other time this week because this is just kind of one of those ones that warrants it.
Sounds good, Ryan.
All right, folks, more on the other end. It's Wake Up War Chant on 97.9 ESPN Radio, brought to you by your friends at For the Table. For the Table, best happy hour in town, 4 to 7 tonight. Make sure you're out there. 3 different places, 1 great price, all in the heart of College Town, Madison Social Central Township. We had such a busy day, we didn't even get to barely even talk about Florida State going to a bowl game, Drew. They're going to the Walk-On Independence Bowl in Shreveport.
Yep.
Life comes at you fast. We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about Southern Miss a lot more this week. But first of all, thanks to you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks to you guys for listening. Golick and Wingo's up next, 97.9 ESPN Radio.
WarChant.com is the ultimate inside source for FSU football and recruiting. And now you can get in on the action for free for an entire month. WarChant.com is offering a risk-free 30-day trial subscription. Get full access to the #1 website covering the Seminoles just by entering the promo code WarChant30. That's WarChant30. Sign up and get in on the world's most active FSU message boards. Receive breaking news, stories from our award-winning staff, plus get exclusive interviews and videos. Just enter the promo code WarChant30. WarChant.com, your ultimate Seminole sports source.